From the Foundation Studio on Biloxi's Back Bay, welcome to SuperTalk Outdoors, where we celebrate every single Monday at lunchtime the world-class outdoors of the state of Mississippi, because we are the capital of the outdoors in America. Hope you're having a great Monday and had a great weekend out in the outdoors. It's a great time of the year to live in Mississippi, that is for sure. Thank you for joining us on the powerful SuperTalk Mississippi radio network, or on SuperTalk TV at C Spire TV. But if you're listening on Facebook, YouTube, or your favorite podcast, it is June the 6th, 2022. Hey, we've got a great show today. We're going to be joined in the first half with my friend David Machado, and we're going to talk about offshore fishing and just our love of coastal Mississippi and how we have such incredible access to fisheries from here. One of the reasons we're the capital of the outdoors in America. And then the second half, we're going to be joined by wildlife biologist Rick Hammock, who is the head of the small game program at the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. So it's going to be a great show. So now let's move over to my friend David Machado. And first, just say good morning, David. How are you, buddy?
Good morning, Ricky. How's it going, man?
It's good. It's good. I've been really looking forward to visiting with you. You and I, we share such a passion for fishing offshore, and more recently, you've gotten deeply engaged in blue water fishing. Doing billfish tournaments and all that. You even caught a couple of bluefin tuna, kind of rare, huge fish. We'll talk about that here in just a second. But before we go any further, I just want to mention that you're a board member for the foundation, officially known as the Foundation for Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. I talk about the organization all the time. I'm proud to have them as a sponsor of this show, but it's a great organization doing important work, isn't it, David?
It's been incredible. Yeah, I'm one of the newer foundation directors, but the work that the foundation does is so critical to, enhancing and preserving the outdoors in Mississippi. And there's so many things that I didn't know about that were important work that they were doing, especially for youth and different things through archery and all kind of stuff that I didn't know about. So it's been a great, that's one of those boards that you serve on that you're really proud and you feel like you're making a difference. So it's been awesome.
Well, you're a busy guy, and back before I retired, I was a busy guy, and I often said that if you want to get something done in the community, you got to go find a busy person to do it, because you get the connection between being involved and helping build a better, stronger Mississippi and having more successful business. You understand that link, and one of the reasons you've been so involved in so many different things. But you're right about the foundation. It's been great doing this show because it's interesting. I've learned a lot about it. Obviously, the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund that the foundation was so much behind. I was, very passionate about that. Watching how the foundation, in so many different ways, has helped fill funding gaps for the department around, and you mentioned it, youth, the importance of youth, hunter education, and the archery program in Mississippi probably is second to none in the United States. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but the work the foundation is doing to support the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, I mean, it can't be overstated how important that work is. And you're surrounded by some really, really dedicated board members, aren't you?
We are. It's a very, very active board, and that's what kind of makes you so proud to sit at that table around the men and women that are involved in that. And everybody's passion is equal there, and it's all about enhancing and preserving the outdoors in Mississippi. And a lot of different projects, a lot of different funding, really involved in the parks. That was something I didn't really know about that falls under the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, but our parks around Mississippi and keeping those to be, great places to go visit, and the opportunity for people to go enjoy the outdoors. It's really special.
It really is. And, we talk about this on the show all the time, but one thing COVID did is help people know that they were safe outside. So, hunting license and fishing license sales went up, and the number of people who are enjoying the state parks went up. It's been a great opportunity. I mean, always in a challenge like something like COVID, obviously, there are always these little pockets of opportunity, and one certainly is a reminder of how precious and important the outdoors is to Mississippi, and why it's important for our conservation and the sort of the legacy we're leaving for our kids and our kids' kids. That's what it's all about. Hey, listen, I spent a whole show with you on my Coast View show, the show on the coast, SuperTalk, focused on coastal Mississippi, about the work that you're doing as an entrepreneur. You're a big, passionate Mississippi State guy, but you've built a thriving and growing multidiscipline architecture and engineering firm. You're headquartered in Biloxi, but you're really doing projects across the Southeast. Tell me more about your firm and what you're up to these days.
Yeah, so I know we're going to talk fishing in a little bit, but we've been so busy. It's definitely been tough to fish as much as I'd like, but we're really busy right now. A lot of our market is in the school work right now. There's a lot of COVID related funding that's in place to enhance air quality, separation, social distancing, things like that. So we're really busy in the school markets right now. Replacing air conditioning systems, putting in new windows to protect UV light and enhance air quality. Expanding so that we can spread kids out a little bit more. So really that's our big push right now and what we're really busy with. But we've also got some great other projects around here that we're working on. But most of our work is probably from, if you drew a line from somewhere around Starkville to Jackson and south, that's where most of our work is. And we've been fortunate and been very, very busy right now.
Well, I mentioned in the show when we visited on Coast View that if you drive around coastal Mississippi, it would be hard not to see a Machado Botano Engineering and Architecture firm sign. That's for sure. Hey, listen, when was the first time that you went offshore in coastal Mississippi in your own boat and said, "Oh, wow"?
Well, as long as my mom's not listening to this, because when I was growing up, I had a 15-foot little skiff that had a 40 Yamaha on the back of it. And I remember we used to trout fish around the rocks there behind Beau Rivage. And every morning when we're out there, I watched all those charter boats run out of Small Craft Harbor and head to the barrier islands. And, they were catching redfish and mackerel and all that kind of stuff. And I said, man, I got to do that somehow. So we would pick our days and we would sneak out there and try to troll for redfish and big bull reds and Jack Crevalle and all that stuff. So I was hooked from a very young age. I was probably 16 years old. And then as I got a little bit older, it's kind of funny. You always want to go a little bit further and a little bit further. So when I was probably 18, 19, it was, I had a buddy whose dad had like a 32 Bertram, I think, and we would go snapper fishing and amberjack and lemon fish. And then, as I got a little bit older, started watching the Biloxi, the Mississippi Gulf Coast Billfish Classic. That's actually this weekend. And I remember being in my late 20s and watching all these boats come in and parade out and bringing big marlin and tuna and things like that. And I was just like, I have to do that. So it's just funny, as you get older, you want to go a little further and a little further and a little further offshore to chase the bigger fish.
Yeah, it is a thing that is progressive for sure. I've done some blue water fishing, but mostly I like to go out. I like to leave from my house and go out and spend the day and be back at the end of the day, and now You've got kind of boat where you can go out and stay out at, in blue water overnight and enjoy it there. But it's been fun. I know that we bumped into each other, fishing for amberjack on reefs, I don't know, 75, 80 miles offshore before. And, we've enjoyed friendships with similar people, but it is, the more you get into the offshore fishing, you talked well about the progression and if I were to tell my story, it's very similar to yours. Spent years of learning Ship Island, for example, and then, really spend a lot of time around Horn Island and wanting to go a little further. And then, eventually, going to some of the shallow rigs off of Chandelier. And my friend Terry Waldrop and I, we used to know exactly how much gas it was going to take for us to get there and then come back. And buddy, once we got there, we had to kill the engine because it was going to be really, really, iffy if we were actually going to make it back or not. But so many great memories, so many. In fact, our really good fishing partner, Kevin Parker, who unfortunately died of cancer last week. What an amazing guy he was. But he fished, Terry and Kevin and I fished together for, I can't tell you how many years. And eventually, Kevin came down with cancer, and he fought it hard, but unfortunately he passed away, and we'll be fishing in his memory now. But look, when we come back on the other side, I want to talk about these last couple of trips that you've taken. You had really a rare occurrence. You had 2 back-to-back trips where you caught bluefin tuna. Unfortunately, you couldn't keep them, and you're in the midst of a billfish tournament. That first one, incidentally, would have been probably a winner for sure.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that and how it feels to have a great crew
on Mississippi's Outdoors. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
As we listen to Steve Azar's song, One Mississippi, the theme song for Super Talk Outdoors from my friend Steve Azar. That song is now the state song for Mississippi. I'm so proud of Steve. I'm so happy for the state of Mississippi. And anyway, Steve's, couldn't happen to a better guy. He's so focused on this great state. And he's such a great ambassador for the state when he travels across the United States, involved in fundraising efforts and doing concerts and whatever. What a great ambassador. He's, in fact, the music and cultural ambassador for the state of Mississippi, and there's a good reason for that. But One Mississippi, what a great song. We're visiting with my friend David Machado. He owns an architecture and engineering firm here in coastal Mississippi and does work across the Southeast. But he's also someone like myself who is literally addicted to offshore fishing. We're going to talk about some of the most recent situations that you've had as it relates to billfish tournaments. But before I do that, when you think about what we have access to from here, David, I mean, whether it be the rigs or incredible reef opportunities, whether it be Chandelier or, just surf fishing for redfish or specks, or it's unbelievable. I mean, truly, it's got to be literally, when you add it all together, some of the most productive fishing water, when you think about all the species that we have access to, some of the most productive is clearly in the United States.
It is, and it's very undervalued and very underrated. But trust me, when you see this weekend and you see, over 100 boats come in to fish this Mississippi Gulf Coast Billfish Classic from Texas to South Florida. They understand truly what we have here. And I was actually on the dock yesterday, and there was a family from Texas that was going snapper fishing this morning. It's amazing because we truly have the total package between the hospitality and the entertainment and the venues that we have here for family and friends and everybody to come and enjoy it. And then, you can go, fishing and, right offshore here and be back the same day and enjoy a dinner at, Mary Mahoney's or something like that at night. I mean, it's truly a special place. And I fish a lot of these tournaments from Orange Beach and Destin, and they have them down in South Louisiana. There's no other tournament in the Gulf of Mexico that brings more boats than this Biloxi tournament. And that's a fact. So
it's been great watching. Of course, I used to fish SKA tournament for many, many years, and, worked closely with Bobby Carter. And what he and Robbie have done with Mississippi Gulf Coast Billfish Classic with a lot of great volunteers is truly remarkable. And Robbie, I've had him on the show, and he talked about how he's utilized social media and photography to really build that. And they're using all the, I mean, really, if you think about it, it's all about just sharing what's actually happening, making sure from the marketing efforts, and especially through social media, people have a good grasp of how special all these components work together, what you can do when you're back on land, what incredible water you have access to. When you have that many, first of all, the number of boats is not just the boats, but the kind of boats that we're talking about here. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of boats all at one time, going out to fish together. It's a hell of an experience, isn't it?
It's special. It's special. And then, when you're down there at the dock, and if anybody's around Biloxi, I encourage you to go behind the Golden Nugget this weekend and just, see an amazing venue of beautiful boats lined up with a lot of friends and a lot of fishing stories, and a lot of tears too, a lot of heartaches, a lot of heart. We were this close. And, we let the big one get away, or whatever the old saying is. It's a lot of fun. A lot of families, do this together and have a good time. And it's really special.
Well, I fished tournament wise for, I don't know, somewhere between 20 and 30 years. I can't tell you how many fish I lost at the gaff. And it's just part of the deal, man. It's just, or get a great bite, it's a great fish, and then lose it immediately, or fight a fish for hours and still lose it. And it goes with the deals. And part of the fun of it is the camaraderie and the stories and the lifelong memories that you're creating that never go away, do they?
That's right. Yeah, it is. It's all about a group of friends.
Hey, one quick thing before we get to the Orange Beach Billfish Classic. You've had a lot of success in your life, as do many of the other boat owners who are involved in these tournaments, but it's still painful when you have to deal with the cost of diesel fuel these days, isn't it?
Oh, man, it is. It's I was looking back at some of my stuff from last summer. We were paying $2.45 a gallon, and now we're paying $5.40 a gallon. So,
man,
yeah, somebody asked me, says, well, what are you going to do? And I'm like, well, there's nothing I can do. The boat has to fish. It has to be used. That's the worst thing, is to sit it up and not do any of that. That costs way more than the fuel. So,
hey, let's go to the Orange Beach Billfish Classic, and you guys, you caught a really big bluefin, and unfortunately, you're like 3 or 4 days out from the official time when you could actually keep a bluefin. You didn't know what it was initially. Where were you? And tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, so we were about probably 3 miles off of the rig, and like you said, they had just closed Bluefin Tuna about 3 days before. There was actually this tournament historically on this weekend. Bluefin Tuna is still open, and they've had several bluefin weighed at that tournament over the years. So it was a little bit rare. What I heard is there were some Texas boats that they had a tournament down there, and evidently they got on a good bite, and they basically, after that quota came in to NOAA, they shut that fishery down, which rightfully so. I'm all for that. Like, we need to protect these fish. They're big, beautiful fish. They're rare. But I can tell you, just from our activity and where they're plentiful in the Gulf this summer. So that was really cool to be seeing them like we have. But we were basically trolling lures about 4 miles off of a rig, really just kind of what we call skull dragging. It's basically just kind of pulling in the blind, just basically moving spots. And he came up and hit one of the lures, and we saw it was a huge fish. 2 guys saw it and thought it was a big marlin. One other guy saw it, and he was probably a little bit more experienced, and he was pretty sure it was a tuna. But regardless, we had to fight it to the end. So 4.5 hours later in the chair, we finally got him to the boat. Confirmed it was a big bluefin tuna. It's the biggest fish I've ever seen in my life, next to my boat. But we kind of floated a tape back on him. It was roughly 100 and somewhere around 106 to 108 inches. And, you can get on an app and estimate the weight of the fish based on some of those measurements. And we estimated it to be around 700 pounds. So it was heartbreaking. But we knew it was a once in a lifetime, for some people, once in a lifetime opportunity and experience. But we were 3 days away from weighing the winning tuna at the Orange Beach Billfish Classic.
So when you say over 100 inches, for people, I mean, the average person who's never even put their foot in salt water before, who watches reality TV like Wicked Tuna, for example, they know immediately what kind of weight we're talking about on a fish like that. But what did you estimate it to be?
We estimated it to be somewhere around 700 pounds. Based on its length, and we kind of tried to, because we had to get the girth too, and that was difficult to do because we had to release the fish. But it was a very, very, very big fish for sure.
And my son-in-law's dad, Keith Williams Sr., is the guy who had the pleasure of having his number called for that particular fish, wasn't he?
He sure was. He took a lot of ibuprofen the next day, but yeah, he was the guy in the chair for 4.5 hours, and I'm telling you, he put up a hell of a fight. He never gave up. Fish. We were fishing an 80, that's the size reel we fished, and that's a 80-pound basically test line that goes on that reel. We back our reels with braid, and we put about 400 or 500 yards of mono top shot on what we call it top shot. So the fish basically took about 450 yards of that mono. It never got down to the braid, but we could see it, in the spool. And so it was just inch by inch, turn by turn. That's at some point, 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. But, we finally, after 4+ hours, got it up.
Well, look, we're out of time, but the rarity of what you experienced was the very next weekend you fished another tournament and caught another one in the 4+ 100-pound range. But then we'll catch up with you toward the end of the summer and see how you've done with your billfish tournaments, and just keep the conversation going. It's been a pleasure catching up with you, my friend.
Same here, Ricky. Appreciate you as always, man. Keep spreading the word. Appreciate it.
Good luck to you. Good luck to you in the future tournaments, especially this weekend. This has been David Machado, and just a good friend, someone who loves fishing offshore coastal Mississippi just like I do. When we come back, we're going to continue the conversation and talk about small game in Mississippi. See you after this break. Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I really enjoyed that conversation with David Machado. There are a lot of people like David here in coastal Mississippi, whether they're pier fishing or wading or doing, backwater fishing or fishing at the islands offshore, in their boats or wading offshore, along the incredible, surf fishing that we have at the islands, or whether you're further out catching snapper. Incidentally, the snapper reports have been incredible. Or going a little bit deeper and catching some amberjack and some mahi, or going out to Bluewater and catching a 700-pound bluefin tuna. There are so many passionate fishermen all across the state of Mississippi, and when you consider what we have access to here, that's why I continue to say we're the capital of the outdoors in America, here in Mississippi. Now we're going to shift gears to my friend Rick Hamrick, excuse me. I don't know why I missaid his name. I knew how to say his last name there. But anyway, he's the small game program coordinator for the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
Sorry for destroying your name there at the beginning.
That's all right.
Hey, listen, I told you this when we were off the air, but if there is a common theme when I go through each of my guests and where they first found a love for the outdoors, I mean, almost to a person, if they learned the outdoors from a grandfather or a father. Some people learn it from a friend when they get a little bit older, but if they learned it from a grandfather or a father, or in some cases a mother or a grandmother, small game is usually sort of the Rosetta Stone that connects people to the outdoors. So you as the program coordinator and as a wildlife biologist, that very well, don't you?
Very much so, and that's of course true for me as well. I got my start small game hunting, like a lot of those folks you mentioned. My father obviously kind of took me and showed me the ropes there, and so kind of had a background in it, and that's certainly where I started.
Where did you grow up?
I actually grew up in Newton County, Mississippi, down the east central part of the state.
Yeah, cool. And what kind of hunting did you do growing up?
Primarily, of course, started out with squirrel hunting. That was always a big draw to me. Of course, deer hunted as well, like a lot of folks did. Of course, that was when deer numbers were really very, very high in Mississippi back in the kind of the early 90s, sort of when I came up there. So deer was big, obviously. Turkey hunting as well, and so those were probably the big things I really did hunting wise there. So
when did you know you wanted to make wildlife conservation a career? Where did that come from?
Oh, kind of an interesting story, I guess, for me. Maybe a little different than some. I sort of grew up around it. My father was a wildlife biologist, and so I kind of had the experience of it to some degree there as a child. Wasn't something necessarily I thought I was going to make a career until probably by the time I kind of got to where I was getting ready for college, like a lot of kids do, going through all the different career path things in your head there. Started with several things before that, and just kind of came back around to that was just I couldn't figure out anything else I really wanted to do. So kind of having the exposure to it growing up, hunting, fishing, just sort of being outdoors, all the other things that went along with it, the naturalist components and things like that just sort of led me into it, and here I am today.
Well, you know what's so interesting, Rick, about your story, and I hear this over and over again from people from the department. Once you found that this is where you wanted to, put your stake down in your career and make a contribution, the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks is full of people like you who are just incredibly passionate about what you do and wanting to take all this knowledge that you gained to preserve and conserve the resources for generations to come. And when you add up all these efforts that are underway inside the department, it's got to be great to be a part of something like that.
It really is. I mean, we have a really great staff. The folks we have in the field are really top notch. I mean, they're I believe as good as anybody in the nation. So, Mississippi gets a lot of bad press for a lot of things, but we have an outstanding group of staff there, and so it's a real pleasure to work with a great group of folks like that.
One of the things that was important when we were having this debate, and I'm so glad the state has now passed a bill for the Conservation Trust Fund, and we'll continue to advance improving that effort along the way. But one of the things we kept saying was that, over 80% of the land in Mississippi is privately owned. And if we're going to be really serious about our conservation efforts, we have to do conservation on public land, and we've got to do conservation on private land. What's interesting about the private lands program for the state of Mississippi, and also the small game program for the state, is you guys have been super focused on making sure that we are doing conservation across all land in Mississippi, especially private land. You dedicate a lot of your energy into that area, don't you?
Sure. Private land really makes up the bulk of the land acreage in Mississippi, being a rural state. I mean, we do have a lot of great public land opportunities and places to do that. And of course, that's important to a lot of folks too. Certainly, that's certainly a very big part of what we do and what we need to do. But certainly, I mean, a lot of these things, the conservation initiatives, things we have to do to really make wildlife conservation successful, has to happen on private land as well. So, we really can't overlook that part of it either. So,
people think, if you think about squirrels, for example, people think if you talk about squirrels, they're always going to be there. And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, the fact that you guys are working hard on surveys, you're working hard to understand the whole sort of realm of the current situation as it relates to small game in Mississippi. We'll talk more about some of the specifics in the program here in just a second, but when we come back from the break. But just in a nutshell, if you were to tell someone what the small game program is in Mississippi, how do you describe it?
I guess I would kind of describe that as just sort of being the program for those species, primarily squirrels, rabbits, and quail, really are the ones that fall kind of in the small game program area there. And really, I guess kind of what we focus on is, like you mentioned, just sort of keeping track of those, trying to keep tabs on the populations there, just what they're doing, keeping an eye on things like harvest trends and just sort of what's going on there, just to keep a tab on the resource there, just making sure we're doing things management wise, regulation wise that are beneficial for the species and conserving those, but still allowing the recreational harvest opportunities, but also the habitat management components as well. There's various research things we learn, and then we try to apply those in the field. And so obviously working with landowners is a big thing that we do a lot of times in conjunction with our private lands program, providing that technical guidance to folks to manage habitat, make good decisions on land use for that species they may be interested in. And so that's just a lot of the sort of what we do there is just oriented on the conservation of those species there, that trying to make the best management recommendations we can.
So Rick, I lease 3 separate farms up in the Mississippi Delta, one in Shula, one between Greenwood and Blackhawk, and then another over in Minter City, and have a great relationship with the farmers. And so it's terrific, actually. We work very closely together on habitat improvement and doing the things that you need to be able to do. But what I've seen now that I've been engaged in actually managing just a little family hunting club, essentially, what I've done, I've learned a lot about the importance of habitat way beyond just food plots for deers, for example. And what I have found is the more I have conversations with people like me who either own land or lease big tracts of land, that they all seem to have, particularly farmers are involved, they all tend to have this kind of great relationship with local farmers. And everybody's a lot smarter these days about the role, for example, that controlled burns play, and why habitat is so critical when you start talking about quail and it's in Turkey, for example. I mean, there's a very symbiotic relationship that both of those species have with the land. And obviously rabbits are obviously more tolerant, obviously, but I've noticed just a growing level of awareness about habitat that may not have been there 5 or 10 years ago. What do you attribute that to? Just you guys, just the accumulating nature of the knowledge, maybe social media? What is it? Why are people so much more aware of these things today than they were, say, 5 or so years ago?
I think it's probably a little bit of all of the above. I would probably attribute some of that to our private land staff. Now that we've made a commitment as an agency to really focus on that as being an important part of what we do for about 15 years or so now, I think that's starting to pay off there. Those landowners has really improved the educational component there, getting the information out. But also, like you say, a lot of there's so much there now that folks can get. And I think that's helping as well. And so, we do a lot to try to get information out and to reach those folks too. So I think it's a little bit of all of the above.
We're talking to Rick Hamrick, who's the head of the small game program for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. When we come back, we'll talk about the annual hunter survey that's underway and some other work that they're doing that's vital to improving small game in Mississippi. We'll see you after this break.
We live in one of the best places in America to enjoy the outdoors. So let's talk about it. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I really enjoyed this part of the show because not only did we learn what people like Rick Hamrick, who's head of the small game program for the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, we get to know a little bit more about the man behind the programs. And as I've said so many times, we get to hear once again the passion that these people who work for the department have for conservation and in teaching people what they know, so that we can all have the ability to enjoy this for the rest of our lives, and maybe our kids and our kids' kids can do the same thing. So it's really important. So I'm enjoying visiting with my friend Rick Hamrick. So, hey, Rick, you guys do an annual hunter survey that's happening in the next couple of weeks. Tell us about that.
Well, our hunter survey we've been doing now for probably over 40 years now. Some folks may not be aware of it, but it's one of the ways that we gather information on kind of what folks are hunting, kind of the harvest trends, especially. They're not perfect estimates, but they give us a lot of information, that we don't really have another way to get. And so kind of how that works is we take our licensed customer database that we have. When you buy a hunting license, you get put in the database there for record keeping as far as who has the license and everything. And so we draw a sample from that, or a contractor we work with, actually, that's a natural resources survey firm that we use. And so we contract with them just because they have all the tools and resources to do that. It's much more efficient to do it that way. And so we work with them to draw a sample of those license holders, and then they will make phone calls. We've done it with mail in the past. Recently, we've been doing it with the phone call route there. And so they'll call someone when they get someone that's willing to take the survey. They'll ask them a series of questions about what they hunted, how many they harvested, and maybe a few other little questions there that go along with it. And so then they compile that, and then it gives us a report of sort of the harvest estimates and trends, numbers of hunters for all of our different game species. And that's kind of what we use to sort of measure harvest trends over time. And so, like I say, we've been doing that pretty consistently since about the early 80s. And so initially it was just residents. Now it includes residents and non-residents. And so just kind of gives us a snapshot of what's going on there harvest-wise, from deer down to even coyotes and things like that. So there's a big long list of things there that are included in the survey, but that's useful information to us. State agencies are charged with managing all of our resident game species, but we also include some of the migratory bird information in that as well. And so, like I say, it gives our agency that's charged with managing those resources sort of an idea of what's going on and relative to game harvest and the species that are in those game classifications.
Well, I think it's important that you guys work with a natural resources survey firm to do the kind of work that you're doing here. But as a former executive for news media for like 16 years of my career, we spent a lot of time working with firms to get really good and reliable sample sizes so that we could get the kind of data we needed to be able to drive our company. I mean, it's really important. And you're not driving a company per se, but you are driving conservation efforts off this. So my point would be to people who get the call, take the time, know first of all that this effort's out there, but they would not be able to understand sort of what your habits are related to the outdoors, especially as it relates to small game, which is where they're headed with the survey, if you didn't participate. So it's important, the more people who participate, that means the less phone calls they've got to make. And these days, everybody's tired of getting phone calls. But when you hear it's about this effort, take the time and answer the questions. It doesn't take long, and help kind of feed into the State Wildlife Agency from Mississippi the kind of information they need to be able to manage it. Over the years, you've gotten some great information, haven't you, Rick?
Yes. I mean, we'll even sometimes put some different maybe topical questions, maybe about certain things, just kind of get people's opinions. We don't do a ton of opinion stuff with that format, but sometimes we will put some simple things in there. So that's always useful, just to kind of have that ability to just get some information quickly, get some feedback. And so, it's responsive management out of Virginia is who does that survey for us. And so, yeah, like you said, if you do get that call, it is a legitimate survey on our behalf. And so yeah, we do get a lot of good information there, especially those harvest trends are really useful, just having that long-term data, especially just sort of seeing what's going on as far as participation and harvest is really valuable to us.
The other thing you guys are doing in the wildlife management areas for Mississippi is you're taking a survey of the Bobwhite quail, and we got less than a minute left, but tell me real quick what that's about.
Well, real quickly, we do this on our wildlife management areas, maybe not every one of them, but some of our areas that have habitat conditions that are kind of conducive to supporting some quail populations. And so it's not a perfect census technique or anything like that, but it's another thing that kind of gives us some trend data. And so after we do that for multiple years, it gives us an idea about kind of what the populations are doing year to year, and it may even give us some sort of localized information. And so it gives us some information about the populations.
Yeah, it's great to hear you guys are engaged in that. I look forward to having you back. You're someone I've enjoyed visiting with and getting to know better. And the work you're doing through the small game program is so critical to Mississippi, and it's generationally important, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show. So thank you for joining me, my friend.
Sure thing.
So this has been Rick Hamrick, who's the small game program coordinator for the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. Have a great week. We'll see you next Monday, and stay safe when you're in the outdoors. See you later.